David never expected love to feel so simple, so certain, until he met Erin. She wasn't just beautiful. She had a fire in her that lit up every room. From the first time they talked, it felt like the world quieted around them. She laughed easily, listened deeply, and looked at him like he was the only man alive. For David, falling in love wasn't a slow burn. It was a free fall, sudden and exhilarating. They cooked dinner side by side, danced barefoot in the kitchen, shared whispered dreams in the dark. On their wedding day, as she walked toward him beneath a string of backyard lights, he thought, this is it. This is forever. Erin once told him, with you, I finally feel like I belong somewhere. And that line became a thread in the story he built for them. They weren't rich or flashy, but they had something rare, comfort, laughter, and a quiet kind of joy. David believed love meant showing up even when it was hard, even when life got messy. And Erin, he thought he'd found someone who felt the same. What he didn't know then was that sometimes love isn't enough to stop someone from leaving. The cabin was meant to be a peaceful escape. Crackling fireplaces, shared meals, late-night card games under string lights. David hadn't seen most of his extended family in years, so when his cousin Miles suggested a lakeside reunion in Vermont, it felt like the perfect idea. Erin was hesitant at first. A whole weekend with your family? She teased, raising an eyebrow. But he saw the curiosity behind her smile. When they arrived, the lake shimmered like glass, and the lodge stood proud among the trees, warm, rustic, and full of memories waiting to be made. David spent the first night introducing Erin to his aunts, uncles, and cousins. She dazzled as always. Her laugh floated through the room like music. She slipped into every conversation with ease, charming even the most distant relatives. David was proud this was his wife, and she belonged effortlessly. But beneath the surface of laughter and wine, something was stirring. While David tended to his grandmother, who was recovering from hip surgery, Erin spent more and more time with Miles. It started small, helping gather firewood, sitting close during group games, sharing private jokes. David noticed, but said nothing. Miles had always been magnetic, the kind of person who made everyone feel seen. Still, something in Erin's eyes when she looked at him was different, something David hadn't seen in a while. As the weekend unfolded, so did the space between them. David was too busy caring for family to see it fully, but in that cozy cabin, the cracks in his marriage quietly began to form. After the retreat, the rhythm of David and Erin's life began to stutter in subtle, unsettling ways. At first, it was small, missed dinners, distracted nods. Conversations that felt more like to-do lists than shared moments. Erin, once full of spontaneous affection and laughter, became quieter, more distant. She was always just tired, always scrolling, always somewhere else. Her phone, which used to sit casually on the coffee table, now never left her side. Locked, face down, clutched like a secret. David told himself not to overthink it. Maybe she was just adjusting back to work life. Maybe the retreat had worn her out more than she let on. But that voice inside him, the one that noticed the late nights, the sudden client emergencies, the way her kisses became routine and her eyes stopped lingering, grew louder. Erin had always been organized, cool under pressure, but now she talked about office chaos like it was a war zone. We're restructuring, she'd say, slipping off her heels at 9 p.m. It's just temporary. But her smiles felt rehearsed, and the warmth in her touch had all but vanished. David stayed patient. He cooked her favorite meals, left notes in her bag, tried to believe this was just a phase. He missed her deeply, even when she was sitting right next to him, and though he didn't want to admit it, the silence between them was beginning to feel like a wall, one he couldn't climb, one she didn't want to tear down. The unraveling came not with a scream, but with a quiet snap, the kind you don't notice until everything starts falling apart. One evening, after yet another canceled dinner and a vague text from Erin saying she'd be late again, David sat in the dim glow of their living room, the silence pressing against him like fog. That's when his phone buzzed. It was Cole, his best friend since high school. The message was short, hesitant, almost apologetic. Man, I'm at that rooftop place near your building. I just saw Erin, and she's not alone. David's heart kicked hard. He called immediately, his voice low and tight. Are you sure? Cole didn't hesitate. Yeah, she's with Miles. They are close. Real close. David's world blurred. His breath hitched. The pieces clicked together like the final move in a puzzle he'd refused to finish. He asked for a picture, and Cole sent it. Erin, laughing, her hand brushing Miles's arm, the intimacy undeniable. It was like a punch to the soul. David stared at the screen for what felt like hours, feeling the truth settle over him like dust after an explosion. Quiet, choking, undeniable. Still, part of him clung to denial. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it was a bad angle, a coincidence, a misunderstanding. But deep down he knew. The woman who once kissed him like she was afraid of losing him now smiled at someone else like he didn't exist. And in that moment, David realized love, no matter how deep, can't survive in the dark. The confrontation was not a fiery explosion. It was a quiet implosion. David had spent days preparing what to say, playing out every version in his head. Calm, accusatory, pleading. But when Aaron walked through the door that night, tired eyes and the scent of someone else's cologne clinging faintly to her coat, the words fell out raw and unrehearsed. "Are you seeing him?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. She paused mid-step, like the question winded her, then exhaled slowly. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, not meeting his eyes. "But yes, I'm with Miles." Just like that. No denial, no excuses. A truth dropped like a stone into the quiet pool of their living room. David stood frozen, every breath aching. This was the woman he had built a life around. The woman who once danced with him barefoot in the kitchen. Now she was peeling off her coat, like the confession meant nothing. "You were supposed to be my forever," he said, more to himself than to her. Aaron finally looked at him, her gaze glassy but distant. "And I was, for a while." That line shattered something inside him. No screaming, no slamming doors, just a stillness so heavy it hurt to breathe. She left that night, not in a dramatic exit, but in a quiet closing of the door that somehow felt louder than any fight they'd ever had. And David, still standing in that silence, realized forever had an expiration date after all. Weeks passed in a blur of silence and sleepless nights. David functioned on autopilot, answering emails, folding laundry, stirring coffee he never drank. The divorce papers arrived, crisp and clinical, like the final chapter of a book he didn't want to finish. But what truly unraveled him wasn't the paperwork. It was the phone call from his cousin Avery. "I thought you should know," she said gently. "Miles, he's trans. He used to be Melissa." The words hung in the air like smoke. David sat down slowly, his heart thudding in disbelief. Not because Miles had transitioned. That didn't bother him. What shook him was the secret. Aaron didn't know. She couldn't have. Not Aaron, who was raised in a picture-perfect town with picture-perfect values. A place where people whispered behind closed doors and truth was only accepted if it fit neatly into a family photo. David stared at the wall, memories crashing in, Aaron laughing with Miles at the retreat, the sudden bond, the stolen glances. It all made sense now, and yet none of it did. He didn't feel vindicated. He felt betrayed on every level, by her dishonesty, by his cousin's opportunism, by the universe's twisted sense of irony. Part of him wanted to call Aaron and drop the truth like a bomb. Watch her perfect world shake under the weight of it. But he didn't. Not yet. Because sometimes the sharpest knife is the one you don't throw right away, but the one you hold until it cuts the deepest. The invitation arrived on a Thursday, an elegant envelope with embossed gold lettering and a wax seal that felt like mockery. David stared at it for a long time before opening it, half expecting a joke, a mistake, anything but what was inside. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Aaron Calloway and Miles Rowan." The irony was so thick it nearly choked him. The same woman who once stood beside him beneath twinkle lights, whispering vows of forever, was now marrying the man who had unraveled everything. But what made his blood run cold wasn't the announcement itself. It was the message tucked inside. A small card, scrawled in Aaron's handwriting. No hard feelings. "Let's begin again." Begin again? David nearly laughed. The audacity of it burned hotter than any rage he'd felt before. But instead of tearing the invitation apart, he placed it gently on his desk. For the first time in weeks, he felt something other than numbness. Purpose. If they wanted a new beginning, he would give it to them. Not in the form of forgiveness, but in truth. Cold, unfiltered, and unshakable. He found a small wooden box, wrapped it with a soft silk ribbon, pink, blue, and white, and tucked inside a handcrafted cake topper. 2 brides in a loving embrace. Symbolic, deliberate, a message in miniature. David didn't care about applause or revenge. He wanted clarity, accountability, and if they were bold enough to invite him into their fantasy. He'd returned the favor by handing them reality on a silver platter. The wedding was in full swing when David stepped into the tent. Dressed in a suit he hadn't worn since his own vows were still intact. Laughter bounced off the canopy. Champagne fizzed in flutes. And the DJ was spinning some saccharine love song that made his teeth ache. Heads turned the moment he arrived. The murmurs started before he even crossed the room. But David didn't flinch. He walked straight through the heart of it all, calm and composed, a small box in hand wrapped in soft ribbon. Pink, blue, and white. Erin's smile faltered when she saw him. Miles went pale, his jaw tightening like a man walking a plank. I came to return the kindness, David said evenly, holding out the gift. After all, you invited me. Erin hesitated before untying the ribbon. She peeled back the tissue and lifted out the cake topper. Two women in white dresses, locked in a tender embrace. A hush fell over the tent. Miles stared, frozen. Erin blinked, confused. What is this? She asked. David's voice carried just loud enough. A tribute to the life Miles used to live, before he became the man of the hour. Silence cracked like thunder. All eyes swung to Miles. It's not a joke, David added. It's the truth. And as Miles once said, truth is a blessing. He stepped back and placed the topper on their untouched cake. Then he simply turned and walked away, leaving behind not chaos, but clarity, the kind that leaves scars in its silence. Erin disappeared not long after the wedding, slipped off the map like a ghost escaping a burning house. Word trickled through mutual contacts. She'd left Miles, packed what little she had, and vanished into the city. No dramatic farewells, no cryptic messages. Just gone. David heard whispers that she was living out of her truck, the same one her parents had gifted her when she landed her first big girl job. The leather seats she once bragged about were now her makeshift bed. The girl who once glowed in cocktail dresses and curated perfection on social media was now folding herself into the shadows. It wasn't triumph David felt when he heard the news. It was something colder, quieter, a strange mix of pity and detachment. Erin had once called him her home. Now she had none. Miles, from what David gathered, had tried to salvage it. Apologies, late-night messages, pleased to work things out. But whatever fantasy they'd built collapsed under the weight of truth. Erin had chased escape and ended up exactly where she feared, alone, exposed, and broken in the eyes of both her family and herself. David never reached out. He didn't need to. Life had drawn its own boundaries. She had wrecked her old life and rushed into another, only to run again when it got too real. She wasn't a villain, maybe, but she was a runner. And eventually, the road always ends. Erin just didn't realize she was already out of pavement. David had every reason to be bitter, to let the betrayal define him, but he didn't. As the dust settled, he found something unexpected in the silence. Peace. Not all at once, and not without pain, but slowly, like sunlight seeping through cracked blinds. He started spending time with people who didn't ask him to explain the hurt, just sat beside him in it. He volunteered at a local youth shelter, mentoring kids who knew too much about abandonment. He picked up his sketchbook again, and one rainy afternoon in a quiet cafe, he met someone new, not dazzling or dramatic, but gentle, steady, and real. They didn't rush. They talked about music, favorite books, the small joys that once felt out of reach. With every passing week, David stopped measuring his worth by the scars someone else had left behind. He began to believe in love again. Not the sweeping cinematic kind, but the kind that shows up on ordinary Tuesdays and stays. Erin had run from the truth. David had walked through it. And on the other side, he found something even stronger than closure. He found himself, whole and unafraid to be loved again. In today's world, where relationships can be fleeting and appearances often mask deeper truths, David's story reminds us of the power of self-respect and emotional honesty. When trust is broken, it's easy to spiral into revenge or despair, but healing starts with choosing dignity over chaos. Don't chase closure from people who ran from responsibility. Instead, invest in yourself. Surround yourself with those who bring peace, not confusion. Love should feel like a safe place, not a battlefield. And if someone walks away, let them. The right people don't make you beg to be seen. They meet you where you are and stay.